Story 1. The Malevolent Spirits of Oakwood Manor. The old oak tree loomed over Oakwood Manor like a silent sentinel, its gnarled branches casting twisted shadows across the weathered facade of the mansion. For generations, the manor had stood on the outskirts of town, its halls echoing with whispers of long-forgotten secrets. It was on a dark and stormy night that Emily and her friends, Marcus and Lisa, found themselves gathered around a dusty Ouija board in the dimly lit parlor of Oakwood Manor. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows and sending shivers down their spines. "I can't believe we're doing this," Lisa whispered, her voice trembling with excitement and fear. Emily smiled nervously, her fingers hovering over the planchette. "Come on, it'll be fun. Just a harmless game, right?" Marcus nodded, his eyes fixed on the board. "Let's see if we can contact any spirits." With a sense of trepidation, they placed their fingers on the planchette, the wood smooth and cool beneath their touch. Emily took a deep breath and spoke into the darkness. "Is there anyone here with us? Can you hear us?" For a moment, nothing happened. The only sound was the ticking of an old grandfather clock in the corner of the room. And then, with a suddenness that made them jump, the planchette began to move. It slid across the board, spelling out words in a jerky, uneven motion. Hello. Emily's heart raced as she looked at Marcus and Lisa, their eyes wide with shock. "Is someone moving it?" she whispered. Marcus shook his head, his face pale. "No way. I'm not touching it." They watched in horror as the planchette continued to move, spelling out messages from beyond the grave. "OHOAREOU. We're just here to talk," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We mean no harm." The planchette paused for a moment as if considering her words. THEDEADDONOTSPEAK. A chill ran down Emily's spine as she read the words. "What do you want from us?" The planchette moved again, its movement swift and purposeful. "For EEUS. For you from what?" Marcus asked, his voice trembling. But before they could get an answer, the planchette flew off the board, clattering to the floor with a loud crash. The room fell silent, the only sound the pounding of their hearts. Suddenly the temperature in the room dropped, a cold chill settling over them like a shroud. Emily could see her breath in the air, a misty cloud that hung before her face. And then, with a deafening roar, the doors to the parlor slammed shut, the sound echoing through the empty halls of Oakwood Manor. Panic set in as they realized they were trapped. The windows sealed tight against the raging storm outside. They pounded on the doors, screaming for help, but no one answered their cries. "We have to get out of here," Lisa said, her voice filled with fear. They searched frantically for another way out, but the doors were solid and unyielding. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, a foul odor that made their stomachs churn. As they huddled together in the darkness, they heard it, the sound of footsteps echoing through the empty halls of the manor. "We're not alone," Marcus whispered, his eyes wide with terror. They could feel eyes watching them from the shadows, unseen hands reaching out to grab them. "We have to find a way to break the curse," Emily said, her voice trembling with fear. But as they searched the parlor, they found no clues, no answers to the mystery that surrounded them. The Ouija board lay abandoned on the floor, its letters spelling out a message of doom. DEATH. With a sinking feeling, Emily realized what they had unleashed. A malevolent spirit trapped within the Ouija board for centuries, now free to wreak havoc on the living. As they huddled together, the footsteps grew closer, the air thick with the presence of something dark and sinister. And then, with a suddenness that made them scream, the walls of the parlor began to bleed. Thick red liquid oozed from the cracks, pooling on the floor in a grotesque puddle. "We have to get rid of the board," Marcus said, his voice filled with urgency. With trembling hands, they picked up the Ouija board, its wood slick with blood. They carried it to the fireplace, intent on burning it to ashes. But as they reached the hearth, the fire flared to life of its own accord, roaring with an otherworldly intensity. The flames licked at the edges of the board, consuming it with a furious hunger. And then, with a final scream, the spirit was banished, its anguished wails echoing through the manor as the Ouija board burned to ash. Exhausted and shaken, Emily, Marcus, and Lisa collapsed on the floor, the sound of the storm outside gradually fading into silence. "We have to get out of here," Lisa said, her voice barely a whisper. With a nod, they stumbled to their feet and made their way to the doors. To their relief, they swung open easily, revealing the dark, rain-soaked night outside. As they stepped out into the storm, the air felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from their shoulders. They turned to look back at Oakwood Manor, its windows dark and empty. "We'll never speak of this again," Marcus said, his voice filled with determination. And so they left Oakwood Manor behind, the memory of that fateful night etched into their minds forever. But as they drove away, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. She glanced in the rearview mirror, her heart pounding in her chest. And there, in the darkness of the parlor window, she saw it. A faint, ghostly figure staring back at her with empty, soulless eyes. The malevolent spirits of Oakwood Manor had been banished, but their haunting presence would linger on in the minds of those who dared to cross their path. Story 2. The Whispering Planchette. The dusty attic of the old Victorian house creaked as Emily and her friends, Sarah and Alex, rummaged through forgotten relics of the past. Amongst the cobweb-covered trinkets, they uncovered an ancient Ouija board, its wooden surface weathered, and its letters faded with time. "What do you think?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Emily hesitated, a chill running down her spine. "I don't know. My grandmother always warned me about playing with these things." But Alex, ever the skeptic, laughed. "Come on, it's just a game. Let's see if we can contact any spirits." Against her better judgment, Emily nodded, her curiosity getting the better of her. They dusted off the Ouija board, its planchette cold to the touch, and gathered around the dim light of a flickering candle. "Is there anyone here with us?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. For a moment, nothing happened. The air in the attic seemed to grow heavy, the silence oppressive, and then the planchette moved. Slowly at first, it glided across the board, spelling out a name. "Someone, Emily read aloud, her voice trembling. "Anna, are you here with us?" Sarah asked, her eyes wide with excitement. The planchette moved again, spelling out yes in shaky letters. A shiver ran down Emily's spine as they continued to ask questions. Anna, it seemed, was a young girl who had lived in the house many years ago. "Anna, how did you die?" Alex asked, his voice barely a whisper. The planchette moved with an eerie swiftness, spelling out The attic seemed to grow colder as they stared at the board in horror. "Murdered? In this very house?" "Who murdered you, Anna?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. The planchette moved again, spelling out a name that sent chills down their spines. Henry. Before they could react, the candle flickered and went out, plunging the attic into darkness. Panic set in as they fumbled for a match, their hearts pounding in their chests. When the candle was lit again, they gasped in horror. Standing before them was a figure shrouded in mist, its form shifting and changing with an otherworldly light. "Anna," Emily whispered, her voice filled with fear, but the figure did not respond. Instead, it pointed a spectral finger at the Ouija board, its gaze filled with malice. "We have to get out of here," Alex said, his voice trembling. But as they moved to leave, the attic seemed to shift around them. The walls closed in, the shadows twisting and writhing like living things. Desperate to escape, they made their way to the attic door, but it was locked tight, as if by an unseen force. "Help us, Anna," Sarah cried, her voice echoing through the attic, but the figure only laughed. A chilling, otherworldly sound that sent shivers down their spines. With a surge of adrenaline, they turned back to the Ouija board, the planchette still hovering above the letters. "Anna, what do you want from us?" Emily asked, her voice filled with dread. The planchette moved again, spelling out a single word. "Revenge." The word hung in the air, heavy with menace. "Revenge for what?" Alex demanded, his voice shaking with fear. But before they could get an answer, the figure lunged at them, its spectral form passing through their bodies like ice. They screamed as they felt the chill of death grip them, their souls trapped in the attic with the vengeful spirit of Anna. For days, weeks, months, they wandered the darkened halls of the old Victorian house, their voices joining the whispers of the other trapped souls. And then one day, a new family moved into the house. A young girl, about the same age as Anna when she died, found the Ouija board in the attic. Excited to play with her new toy, she gathered her friends around and asked, "Is there anyone here with us?" The planchette moved, spelling out a name. And so the cycle began anew. The haunted Ouija board claiming its next victims, its whispers echoing through the darkened halls of the old Victorian house. Story 3. The Whispering Shadows of Elmwood Manor. The old dilapidated mansion loomed over the quiet town of Elmwood like a specter of the past. Its windows were boarded up, its once grand facade crumbling with age. But despite its decrepit appearance, the locals whispered of the dark secrets that lay within its walls. For Sarah and her friends, Alex and Emily, the rumors of Elmwood Manor were too tantalizing to resist. They had heard stories of ghostly apparitions and strange happenings within its haunted halls, but they brushed them off as mere superstition. As they stood before the imposing gates of the mansion, Sarah felt a sense of unease settle over her. The air was heavy with the weight of history, the shadows dancing ominously in the fading light. "Are you sure about this?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Sarah nodded, her heart pounding in her chest. "We have to know what's inside." With a sense of trepidation, they pushed open the rusted gates and stepped onto the overgrown path that led to the mansion. The air was thick with the scent of decay, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. As they approached the front door, Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The door stood slightly ajar, its hinges creaking in the breeze. "Should we go in?" Alex asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Sarah hesitated, her hand hovering over the door handle. But before she could answer, Emily pushed past her and stepped into the darkness beyond. The interior of Elmwood Manor was shrouded in gloom, the air heavy with the scent of mildew. Dust motes danced in the slivers of light that filtered through the boarded-up windows. As they explored the mansion's decaying halls, they came upon a room that seemed untouched by time. In the center of the room was a table, its surface covered in strange symbols and markings. "What is this?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with fear. Sarah's heart raced as she realized what they had stumbled upon. A Ouija board, its wooden surface polished with age. Without hesitation, Emily reached out and placed her fingers on the planchette, her eyes wide with anticipation. "Let's see if there are any spirits here." Sarah and Alex exchanged a nervous glance, but before they could protest, Emily began to ask questions in a low, steady voice. "Is anyone there?" she whispered, her fingers barely touching the planchette. At first there was no response, only the sound of their own breathing echoing through the room. But then, slowly, the planchette began to move, gliding across the surface of the board with an otherworldly grace. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest as she watched, her eyes fixed on the letters and numbers that appeared beneath the planchette's path. It spelled out a name, Marcus. "Who are you?" Emily asked, her voice trembling with fear. The planchette moved again, spelling out words with an eerie precision. "I am trapped," it spelled, its letters jagged and uneven. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine as she realized what was happening. The spirit of Marcus was communicating with them through the Ouija board. "What do you mean, trapped?" Alex asked, his voice barely above a whisper. But before Marcus could answer, a sudden gust of wind extinguished the candles that lit the room, plunging them into darkness. Sarah's heart raced as she reached for her flashlight, the beam cutting through the gloom. But when she turned it on, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Shadowy figures lurking in the corners of the room, their eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. With a scream, Emily pulled her fingers away from the planchette, the sound echoing through the darkness. But it was too late. The spirits had been awakened, their presence filling the room with a sense of dread. "We have to get out of here," Sarah shouted, her voice trembling with fear. But as they turned to flee, they found themselves surrounded by the whispering shadows, their forms shifting and changing with each passing moment. With no other options, they ran deeper into the mansion, the darkness swallowing them whole. They could hear the spirits' voices echoing through the halls, their words filled with malice and hunger. Desperate to escape, they stumbled upon a staircase that led to the mansion's upper floors. With no other options, they climbed, their hearts pounding in their chests. But as they reached the top of the stairs, they were met with a sight that made their blood run cold. A figure standing at the end of the hallway, its form shrouded in darkness. With a surge of fear, they turned to flee, but the figure was upon them in an instant, its icy grip tightening around their throats. Sarah screamed as she felt herself being pulled into the darkness, her friends struggling against the unseen force. And then, with a suddenness that took their breath away, they were engulfed by the shadows, their screams echoing through the empty halls. The whispering shadows of Elmwood Manor had claimed 3 more victims, their spirits doomed to wander its haunted halls for all eternity.